Hey guys, welcome back to Sockets and Sideburns. So today we've got a little job on the Scenic, changing the front discs and pads. Now this Scenic is a Scenic 3 2012 with the 1.5 DCI engine in it, but this procedure is going to be fairly similar across many Renault models from this era, the Scenics, Grand Scenics and the Meganes as well. Now you may just find that you have different sized discs or pads. I will go over all that in more detail later when we talk about parts, and I will leave as many links in the description as possible to all of the parts, tools or products that I used in this video, so be sure to look there if you see anything that you might want. Now a couple of safety warnings before we start. Everything that we're going to be replacing today, i.e. pads and discs, has to be done in axle sets. Basically that just means you need to do both sides. Also, when you're cleaning out around the brakes, don't use compressed air. Brake dust is nasty stuff. You don't want it spraying up in the air, so you breathe it in. Just use brake clean. Also, we mustn't get any greases, oils, or any lubricants of any description on the brake pad friction material, or they're going to be instantly scrap. And as always, guys, gloves and glasses. Right, let's get to it. Obviously, we need to jack the front of the car up in order to do this job. So handbrake on and chock your rear wheels. And we need to crack the 5/17mm wheel bolts before we lift it up. Even if you've got an impact wrench, just do the locking wheel bolt because they round out very easily with an impact if they're stuck. So just crack these off, quarter turn. And the other side as well. Right, now we can jack the car up and support it on axle stands. Make sure you always support the load of the car with axle stands. Never just leave a car on a jack up in the air. Okay, we'll do the other side as well. Right, that's both sides jacked up. What I do as an additional safety is just throw the jack under where I jacked up on the side that I'm currently working on, just for an additional safety as well as the stand. But obviously the weight is on the stand, not the jack, but I'm just bringing it almost into contact with the jacking point, just so that's there as additional safety. Right, whip the wheel off now. Now you can, if you didn't put a jack under the car as an extra backup for safety, you can stick the wheel somewhere under your sill as extra safety if you like, but I don't need to do that of course because I've got the jack in there. Okay, with your wheel off, it's a good idea just to do a quick inspection to gauge any problems that we may have been having with the braking system. We're just looking for uneven pad wear, things like that on here. Now the minimum thickness for these discs here is 23.4. That's if you have the 296 diameter ones like I have, 296 millimeter diameter discs. And for the 280 millimeter diameter discs, the minimum thickness of the disc is 21.8 mil. Pad minimum thickness is 10 mil, including the backing plate. The UK minimum is 1.5 millimeter of actual friction material in here. And the reason that I'm going to be changing these today, they are obviously very low in the discs. There's a huge lip on the back here. These are run right down now. But if you look on this disc, on this pad here, you can see that we've got the actual friction material seems to be coming away from the backing plate there. That's why I'm changing these today. We'll have a look at that when we get it out. Right, before we start disassembly, it's a good idea to put some cardboard or something similar to that under the side that you're working on. A lot of mud, crud, brake dust and whatnot is going to be coming off of this as we work. And obviously you're going to be doing brake cleaner on here as well, and that'll be dripping down. This will make cleaning up a lot easier and protect your floor. Okay, before we start removing bolts and things, we've got the brake hose here. There may be enough slack to hang it up nicely, but I'm just going to pop the brake hose out of its bracket on the strut here, just to give me a little bit more room, especially for filming. You might be able to get away with this. Just give it a little wipe down on it, just to get the worst of any mud and crud off, and then give it a mark up, mark its relation to the bracket here, so you refit it back on straight where it was before. Put a mark on the bracket and a mark on the rubber there, and then this just pushes out of the bracket like that. That should give us a little more space. Right, this caliper uses an anti-rattle spring. Now with this you can use pliers or a screwdriver to get it out and then back in later on. The main thing to remember is just don't push this too hard. You don't want to bend it out of shape or you'll be buying new ones. Now if you do need any new brake hardware parts, new anti-rattle clips, guide pin bolts, disc screws, things like that, I'll leave a link in the description to a site that you can go to and get it all from. I'm just going to use a small flat blade screwdriver, and if we just get in here under where it pins to the caliper and get the first one out like that, it will just fall away. Then pull it off the ear, bring it forward, and we can get the other side out as well, like that. Next up, around the back of the caliper at the top and the bottom, we've just got two little plastic caps that are covering the guide pin bolts there. We need to take those out. And again, just a flat blade. Try not to, this is all rubber here. Try not to damage it. Just pry that out. And then the bottom one as well. Right, now with those out, we can take out the slide pins. You need a 7mm Allen key or socket for these. Now most Allen key sets won't include a 7mm, so I recommend you either buy a 7mm bit socket or a full set of sockets, bit sockets that includes one. That way you can torque it up properly later as well. So we'll crack both of these off. Crack one and then the other. And then we can run them all the way out. And the top one as well. Now once they're completely undone, as mine are here, you can feel they're just continuing to spin, but not actually coming out of the rubber sleeves on the caliper that they're actually mounted into. They're just going to spin in there because there's a bit of obviously tightness there. If you take your socket and just put it in, and what you can sometimes get away with, if you just put a little sideways tension on them, sometimes you can get them to start coming out, not in this case. So what we're going to need to do, just to get them started, is if we look just down, you can see it best from down on the top one. That's the guide pin bolt there, just poking through. And what you can do is if you get a screwdriver, you can, don't do it on the threads, do it on the actual part of the pin there, and you can just start pushing it back so that it comes away from the caliper itself. And if you're able to get it far enough back into that sleeve, like that, so it's away from the caliper itself. You don't actually need to get them all the way out. Once you've got the caliper off, you'll be able to push them the rest of the way. So I'll do that to the bottom one as well. And there you go, you can see how easily that bottom one's just started to come out there. Once you break that initial bond, you should then just be able to coax them out easy enough. That's one out there. And the top one hasn't quite come just far enough. Once you get them moving, you should be able to get it out. What you can also do is, if just a little bit more with the screwdriver, there we go. And once they're free away from the actual caliper bracket, then you could actually just take the caliper off and push them out some other way. But these ones have come out just like that. They can sometimes just take a little bit of persuasion. Right, now the caliper can come off. We're going to be hanging it up. I'm using a caliper hook in order to do this. You can use a bungee cord or a bit of string, something, just tie it up. We'll hang it from somewhere on the suspension, probably the spring. You cannot leave them hanging on their hoses. So see if the caliper will just wiggle off or not. It may need a little persuasion with a pry bar in there. In order to get us off. I think these brakes definitely long overdue. Okay, if you're struggling to get the caliper off like that just there, it's going to be because one of the pads, in this case the inboard pad, is stuck behind the lip that's developed on the edge of the pad there, so you'll never slide it off. What you want to do, we're going to have to push the piston back a tiny incy-wincy bit. So go up the top, take your brake fluid reservoir cap off in order to just give this piston a push back, and get a screwdriver or a pry bar somewhere in here so that you can exert a bit of force and push the piston back so that it will retract a little bit, that pad will go back, and then you'll be able to take this off easy. If you try and force it, you're going to rip that clip in the back there. As soon as I heard that clip was starting to pull out there, that's why I've stopped. And then if we just come in here, and we'll go take our reservoir cap off first. Now there's no need to push it all the way back in. We just want to get just enough so that we can ease off that pad. That should be fine. And then the caliper's nice and loose now. We can push it all in the rest of the way in a minute when we get the caliper off. So now get our hook, and the caliper should come off easy now. These pads are a sorry, real sorry state. And then we set a hook up here. We'll just hang this up here for now, out the way. Right, we can get the pads out now, the old pads. The one on the caliper just clips into the piston, so push on both the ears and give it a push out. It should come. See, that's what was holding us back on the brake disc, because this clip is obviously into the piston there. It wasn't going to pass beyond that big lip, so we just needed to take the piston back a little bit. If you haven't left your pads as low as that, you probably won't have that problem, and you'll probably just be able to push the piston back in a minute, like I'm going to do properly. I'll show you the proper process in a second, but there's no other option other than what we just did there, to take the resi cap off and just give it a little push with a screwdriver or a pry bar. Lots of people do that as their actual method to retract the piston the whole way, but you can see just how low that pad is. And we got a slight uneven wear as well. And the outboard pad just literally slides in that bracket there, and that just pulls straight out. Right, next up is to remove the caliper bracket. Before we do that, I like to just slacken off the disc retaining screws. That way, just in case they prove to be stubborn and don't want to come out easy, we can lock the disc against the bracket by wedging a screwdriver in here. Right, these type of screws are pretty notorious for stripping out, so we're just going to be careful with them from the word go. These are a T40, and like I said, we can stick a screwdriver, since we've got a vented disc, into the caliper bracket here so that it stops there and stops it rotating against us. So if we stick our socket in, the first thing we want to check is that we've actually got good engagement there. If you haven't, get a little pocket screwdriver or something like that just to pick out any crud or mud that has gotten into here before you start. And then it's also handy, you stick your socket in, get a soft face hammer in, make sure that socket is firmly seated, and then we can give it a go with a ratchet, but do not push your luck, because if they strip, you'll be sorry. Yeah, I don't think that one's going to go. Let's try this one as well. Okay, that one's broken loose, and we're only just going to slack them off for now. And the other one, what you can try and you know, give your ratchet a knock over by hand like that, but that's very poor engagement in there. Now, the thing that works the best on these is impact shock to loosen them off. So like I did, you can stick your socket in there and give it a hit with a hammer, try and loosen it that way. But the gold standard for dealing with these is go old school and use an impact screwdriver on them. You can also try an impact wrench or something like that, but that only does hammer blows sideways. You're not getting any impact force inwards if you do it that way. So I'll give this a go. I'm just going to reposition the camera so I can get a better swing at it like that. There we go. I think that might have, I think I saw it move. go. It's moving, it's still not loose. Cool, blimey. There we go. Right, that's slack and it hasn't broken. That one might be a candidate for replacement because, of course, there might be a little bit of damage. If this, now this T40, if it ends up a loose fit, next time we might not be so lucky. So we'll probably replace that. And don't forget, take your screwdriver back out. Right, with the disc screws loosened off now, we can take the caliper bracket off. It's just held on by two 18mm bolts, one here at the top and one down here at the bottom. Right, we'll crack these two 18mm loose. They will probably be pretty tight, so you're going to want a long ratchet or a breaker bar or an impact wrench. Make sure your socket's got good engagement on there, and you'll probably need to give it a bash to start it off. Crack them both loose before you run either one all the way out. And then we'll just speed both these two out now. Do the bottom one first, actually. And then we can take our caliper bracket away. Now we can take the disc the rest of the way off. Just finish off bringing out these two T40s. You can see how the rust can set in on those. So that's why they're pretty seized in there. This one probably going to be a little bit worse. Yeah, not looking too pretty. If we are going to reuse these need a good clean up before refitting. Now the disc should be free to come off the hub like this one is here. If it is stuck on the hub there, get some penetrant in around here, around the center of the hub there. And then what you want to do is get yourself a big hammer with some gravity behind it, and you're going to strike on this top hat area here where the wheel mounts up to. Strike around there and it should break it loose. You can hit it from around the back. Just be careful the disc doesn't shatter, and obviously if you do that you're going to have to replace the disc, but this one just coming off easy. Okay, now I'm going to push the caliper piston back. I've just got my brake caliper hook going through the bolt hole here. Just gives us a bit more room around the piston. Now before I push the piston back, I'm just going to give the face here a good clean up just while it's away from the boot. If we try to do this after we push it back, that piston face is going to be right next to the boot and it's a lot harder to clean it without damaging that boot. Now this is a good time as well to check your piston for any signs of corrosion, pitting, anything like that. This one looks great and the boot is all intact, no splits or anything like that. Now you can use a wire brush to clean the face up. I find the best thing is just a bit of Scotch pad. It works well, especially when you got these ones that are hollowed out like that with just a lip here that you need to do rather than the flat face ones. So just come in here with that and just get the worst. Really doesn't take much effort at all, and get anything from off that face. We will have to use small wire brush there. Got some particularly stubborn parts. See if that will shift it at all. Okay, that's looking much better than it did. There are some areas on this piston face that, on the face, not down the sides, that have become a bit pitted, but this car is on 110-ish thousand miles at this point. So these are the original front calipers. Not really very surprising. That's good enough. Got as much of the corrosion off as possible. Okay, with that face clean, we can push the piston back now. You're going to see a lot online about opening the bleeder before you push the piston back. Two reasons are given for doing that. Firstly, it protects the master cylinder seals and it stops old brake fluid being forced back up the line and gets the most contaminated and cooked up fluid out of the system. It also keeps your bleeder moving just a little more regularly, maybe preventing seizing. Now, some people do it this way and plenty of people don't. It's really up to you if you want to open the bleeder or not. It is best practice. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. Now, just know that Renault's own manual does not say you need to open the bleeder, and lots of people who do brake jobs every day don't bother, so it's up to you. Now, before we do push the piston back, however, we need to pop the bonnet and take off the brake fluid master cylinder cap and leave it off while we're pushing the piston back. Now, you're going to have a look at the level inside the master cylinder, and if it's near the top, as it is here, you're going to need to siphon some out, as if we don't open up the bleeder, the fluid's got to go somewhere, and it's going to come back up and fill up this reservoir, and if it's near the top, it'll overflow, and the brake fluid, which is a very effective paint stripper, will go over the top of here and all down into the engine bay. You don't want that. So if it's near the top, just stick yourself a rag under it, grab yourself a clean pipette and a container to put the fluid into, and you're just going to siphon some out. Now, bear in mind, whatever you stick it into, don't use it for anything else again, because brake fluid is poisonous. So don't stick it in any food type container. Just take out enough so that it won't overflow when you push the pistons back. And when you've got it down to a level that you're happy with, just pop a rag over the top of the opening like that. This will just stop any debris getting down into there while you're pushing your pistons back and doing the brake job. And if it does overflow, if you haven't taken enough out, at least the rag will soak up a lot of it before it goes down into the engine bay. Right, so I have this fancy tool for pushing the piston back in. Much cheaper ones are available. They've got ones that just screw in that are like this with these two plates on, and you can of course use pipe grips and things like that, but just be careful doing that with the piston. Now you may want to stick a pad in here to act as a spacer just to help you push it in, and we'll just get set up, and then as we push back we're just going to be going slow and steady is all we need to be doing. Make sure you're set nicely, and slow and steady does it. And you should feel it stop pretty positively. You'll be building up tension, pressure. That's that push back. Switch this back to a more secure hang up now. Now, once you have pushed the piston back, make sure that your boot hasn't puffed up anywhere. If it has, it will be obvious. There'll either be a bit that looks different to the rest of the boot, like it's got air trapped under it, because that's exactly what has happened, or the whole boot might look puffed up, and you're going to need to burp that air out. The air's got trapped behind the boot there. You can try just simply pulling the boot back from the piston a little bit like that. Maybe it will come out like that sometimes. If you can't, then you're going to need to use a pick, preferably a blunt one or a screwdriver. I've got some O-ring picks which are great for doing this. You just need to be careful not to damage the boot, and you're just going to peel away to let that air out. You should just hear a little hiss when it comes out, but do not refit your pad with the boot over the top of the piston like that, or puffed up, because as the piston starts to push on the pad, it will just tear your boot up, and you'll have a seized caliper before you know it. Right, now we've got some cleaning to do. All the cleaning as well as greasing that we'll do later may seem unnecessary, but it really isn't. It'll make the brakes last longer, function better, and cut down on noise. Since we're here, we'll start with the caliper and the hub. However, if you don't have a vise or somewhere to hold the caliper bracket, then best to mount it back onto the car now so that it's fixed to clean it before you do the hub, so you're not dirtying anything else back up again. First up, we'll do that caliper. Obviously, we already cleaned the piston face earlier. We also need to do these ears here that push on the outboard pad. I'll just use a wire brush on this. You just want these ears nice and flat, no high spots on them, nothing that you can catch your finger on. Probably need to dismount it in order to clean it effectively, but just get up in here and get the worst, and try not to breathe any of this in. It will be brake dust and no good for you at all. But just get those ears in there, nicely scrubbed out. Nice and smooth, and nothing that we can catch our fingers on. Good, hang that back up. All right, next up we'll clean the hub. Now it's essential that the hub face here is flat and pretty much spotless back to bare metal, and we need to get all this corrosion and any high spots off of here. Anything on here, even if it's the size of a grain of sand, when you work that out towards the edge of the disc, that's going to give you a huge run out and probably a vibration from day one. Now you can get this clean with a wire brush and some Scotch pad, just go at it. I'm going to be using some drill attachments just to speed this whole process up. I'll leave links for these bits and bobs in the description, like I said. Now the gold standard for doing these is a die grinder and attachments for that. But this stuff for drills is also, it's pretty much as fast, and it is a lot cheaper than the die grinder stuff. I am hoping to upgrade to a die grinder setup eventually. If you are going to use drill attachments like me, just make sure you got your safety glasses on, because sometimes these wires can come flying out. Not pleasant at all. Now you're not going to get this back to being shiny ever again. It's just simply not going to happen. But just make sure, as I said, it's any high spots, any serious corrosion, you got to get it back feeling nice and flat. Okay, that looks good. And then also I'll come in here with one of these sideways action ones just to get down into there. and clean off the hub spigot as well. Okay, that looks good. The other thing is just for any large chunks, go around the edge of the hub just to knock off anything really big or nasty around the edge there. I do that with just a bit of Scotch pad for that. Now also another thing to point out, some people will grease the hub face now in order to prevent the disc from seizing to the hub. I don't do that. Main reasons are the same reasons that we clean the hub up in the first place. Anything back here on this hub face can cause run out and vibrations. So grease on here, especially if you put a whole load of it on, can do the same thing. It can also reduce the friction and clamping forces between the joint faces where you're bolting the wheel on. Now for me, the pros don't outweigh the risks. The only pro of putting anything on here is just so that the disc does not seize to the hub. The pros simply don't outweigh the risks for me, so I don't grease it. So the last thing to clean in here, and this does get forgotten an awful lot, is the mounting hole faces where the caliper bracket bolts go into. Same thing as with the hub face, you want everything dead on and flat, no rust or dirt to space anything off at an angle. So do the fronts, the faces here, and around the back too, make sure these faces are nice and flat. And don't forget around the back as well, might not be so easy with a drill attachment. No, have to go old school for the back. Just as long as there's nothing left on there to space those bolts or caliper bracket off. I also like to run through the holes with this drill wire brush attachment. These holes aren't threaded, but I like to clean them out. And now we'll give everything a hose down with some brake cleaner. This will knock off any loose particles and just degrease everything. We'll work from the top down so that everything washes off and down. I'm going to just stick a old drain pan underneath here because there'll be a lot of brake cleaner coming down. And we'll start with the caliper first. Just give it a hosing. Hang it back up to dry off. And we'll do the hub as well. And the bolt holes, both sides. Just working it from the top down, make sure we haven't got anything loose left on there and everything is thoroughly degreased. And then we'll just give all of the contact surfaces a wipe down with a bit of shop towel, rag, whatever you've got. Right, with everything all clean, we can head over to the bench now and start cleaning up and sorting out the caliper bracket. Right, we'll start off with a wire brushing to get the big chunks off of it all over. Then there are some specific areas that we need to get very clean. So now we need to get these areas here very clean, the areas where the pad's going to slide in. You can get one of your old pads if you like, and where the ears are going to be making contact with the bracket, you can have a look. That there has got to be pretty much spotless, back to shiny or as good as you can get. If there's any rust on these slides here, it will stop the pads from moving freely and reduce their service life. So we've got to get these as spotless as we can. In addition, we want to get the bolt holes and the mounting faces as clean as possible, same as on the car. So starting with the areas where the pads slide then, the best thing to clean these off is a shot blast cabinet, which I don't have and I expect you don't either. Now just start with a wire brush. I'm going to be using the drill attachment again for speed. We need to get this back to bare metal as best we can. We don't want to just simply polish the rust up. So if the brush doesn't get us back to metal, or as close to it as possible, then we'll use a nice flat file, not a coarse one, fine one, and we'll just go over it. We don't want to remove any material, just the rust. Okay, these are looking relatively shiny in there now. Most of this, what's left over, is pitting where the rust has had a real go at them. But that is nice and shiny in there now, and back to bare metal. That wire brush attachment really does do an excellent job of that. So all of this area here where the pad will go sliding in, that's all clean now, and we'll just repeat that on the top one. Bolt holes next, both where the caliper bracket is bolted in and the caliper guide pins bolt into. We'll just clean the faces up first. So they're nice and smooth. And then these holes are threaded, and I will run my brush through. Need the smaller one from the kit for this one. And do the other two as well, of course. All right, and the last thing for this, just give it a hosing with brake clean, just to get the worst of it off. Make sure you do all the holes that you've blowed through as well. Make sure they're all clean out too, and get the top side of the caliper bracket as well. And then give your caliper bracket bolt threads a wire brush over as well, because they had Loctite on them. Okay, next for a cleanup is the caliper guide pin bolts. These need to be free of old grease, corrosion, and no pitting on them. This is essential for proper caliper function. This is what allows the caliper to slide. They need a nice smooth surface on here, so don't hit them with anything too abrasive. That being said, this black residue here, this is the rubber from the sleeves that they go in on the caliper, and that is not going to just simply brush off. What I do, get a Stanley knife, but with the back end, not the sharp end, just basically like a metal scraper, and you can go over these and just scratch off that rubber, because anything you'll use, generally speaking, just doesn't seem to want to pick this stuff off of here. It's kind of bonded to the metal almost, basically. So we'll do that once we get a bit further along with cleaning them. So you can use just a bit of Scotch pad again, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm cheating slightly because I will fit the pin in the ratchet, electric ratchet, and just basically hold the pad over it and rotate it like that. And just make sure that you've not got anything that you can really catch your finger in on here, and that they're nice and smooth. And then, as I said, if you just come in with the back end of the Stanley knife, and just so that that rubber comes off of there. Often helps just to go in the opposite direction as we are here. Different directions can loosen up different bits. So going long ways up the pin, that has removed a lot more this time, and then just give it a final. And just check the threads over as well. You can just give those a quick wire brush if there's anything in them. This one has much more of that coating on it. Just hit it. That's loosened off. You see that's taken a good amount of that off. And we'll try it back to front, but you see that really isn't hitting or getting any more of that off. So Stanley again, but not the sharp side. After you refit them, to be honest, they will probably pick this straight back up again anyway. This is just where they're sitting in the sleeves. This stuff, the sleeve just bonds to them. Feels good. Looking nigh on pristine now. Brush the threads out. That's them two done. And we'll do the same thing with the disc retaining screws. I said earlier how I thought that it had become a little bit loosey-goosey in the head there, but actually, turns out it's actually fine. Get off of there, you. So I will be reusing these, just give them a clean up. In the same way. Get on the countersink there and on the threads as well, best you can. And this might actually be the one. Yeah, I think this was the one that was well and truly seized in there and needed a good whack. That's looking much better. Okay, with everything clean, let's have a look at parts before we start prepping and greasing everything to refit to the car. So for brake discs, I've gone with Ica. I got these from Halfords. They were the cheapest name brand I could find. Now the discs fitted to this car are 296mm diameter. I think these ones come with the Scenics that are fitted with 16 and 17-inch original alloy wheels, whereas the 15-inch original alloys will come with a 280mm diameter disc. The pad sets for each disc are different as well. Now the best way to be sure is just simply measure and check the ones that are on your car. So obviously we're needing 2 discs, which we have in here. Now the discs come coated with an oil, if they're not painted, to stop them rusting in the box. You can get painted ones which don't, and they just look nicer on the car. These ones do have the coating on because they're not painted, and we need to get this oil off before fitting them, obviously. So I'll just show you doing one, but of course I'm going to do the other one as well. And what I'll do is an initial all-round clean at the bench, or next to the car if you haven't got a bench. And I forgot to mention at the start, but I've put clean gloves on to be handling all these parts, because obviously from now everything's going to be fresh and we need to keep that pad friction material free of any contamination with lubricants. So I'll take this disc out the packing. So we'll give it a whole spray over with brake clean now and a good wipe down. I will do another clean of it on the car, of the braking surface when it's mounted to the car, because invariably as we're touching, doing the brakes, getting the pads in and everything, we will get a few bits and bobs on here, and we'll need to clean those off when it's on the vehicle. So just spray liberally all over with brake clean, and on the other side as well. This will just get the worst of it off. And wipe it down. And on the other side too. And then do the other one, of course, as well. Next up is pads. I've gone for Brembo, but again, a good name brand and you should be fine. There is no shims or hardware on this brake setup, just the pads are going to come in the box. And obviously you've got 2 that fit to the caliper piston, and then 2 outboard ones that just sit in the bracket. And as I said, if you need any brake hardware, so anti-rattle clips, new caliper pins, or even the disc screws, I'll leave a link to a great website that you can go to and pick all of these things up. You just put your number plate in and you can find most brake hardware like this. Although, take the part number off their website and then go to eBay, because usually they're cheaper on eBay than on the website. Okay, now we're on to prep work and greasing. So we need the caliper bracket. So we're going to need our brake pads, and what I like to do just before we start greasing anything up, it's not as critical on these. They don't have any shims in or anything like that, as it usually is with the brake pads. But if you just dry fit your pads just to make sure that they will easily slide in the caliper bracket, there's not going to be anything that's going to bind them up, and that is totally fine like that. So that's great. Right, now we can start doing our greasing. 3 things to know about the greasing. Firstly, with the caliper pins, you must only grease them using either a grease that specifically says it can be used on slide pins or a silicone grease. In the case of these ones, these are a little different to the ones that sit permanently inside a caliper bracket with the little boots on. These ones, you don't really need to put much grease on these because they slide into a sleeve kind of thing that's on the caliper, and when you push them in, most of that will just simply be wiped off as you push them in, but I'll still put a little smidge on there. Second is that on the caliper bracket slides and also on the pad ears here, you need to be using a brake grease, something like Mintex Ceratec or Liquid Mully Make anti-squeal paste, something like that. Third, and most importantly, remember, as I said at the start of the video, under absolutely no circumstances let any grease, oil or any lubricant get on the pad's friction material. So I am currently using the Pro Slip grease kit. Now this kit comes with 3 different greases for different parts, and it has the only grease that I've ever seen that's just made for the slide pins. I'm currently trialing this out. It was an Amazon recommended product for so long, always appearing at the top of search results, that I just thought I'd give it a go, and used it on the rear brakes for this car, and we've had no complaints out of that so far, so I've been continuing to use it. So I'm going to start with the bracket first, and we're going to be using the clip tube for this, or you could just use a normal brake grease like I said. So we're going to grease these slides, which will hopefully slow down corrosion and help to keep the pads moving, stop them getting seized in here. I'm going to be applying it with a brush just for a little bit more precision and to help me get a nice thin layer on there. And we're going to be going sort of here on this flat, all in here and down there, anywhere where the pads are going to make contact with and slide in the caliper where that needs to be done. And just a thin layer on here. You don't need to go gooping it all up. That looks good, and do the other side as well. That's excellent. And now just the pad ears where they're going to be making contact with the caliper bracket, so around here and around there, just around that ear, both of them. Just try not to touch the friction material as you hold them, grab it by the backing plate. Again, we're going to be using the clip grease for this, and just make sure you don't contaminate that friction material. Just a very light amount on there. A little too much up there, so take it to the other side. That's everything covered. That looks good for the outboard pads. And then again, the same for the inboard pad that's going into the piston. And then also with this one, what I want is just a little on the clip where it's going to go into the piston, just to help stop it seizing in there. So just wherever that clip will actually be pushed on by the piston, if we just get literally a film of it on. Just to stop it from getting stuck. Make it nice and easy to ping it out next time. It's probably a smidge too much on there, so I'll just wipe over again. Really don't want much for this part. Oh dear. That's that one done as well. Now, you may have noticed that I didn't use the pad tube from the kit. The reason for this is this is for metal to metal contact, and these pads have rubber shims, anti-squeal shims on them. Now, this grease, this pad grease, would be fine if you had no shims or metal shims, but it may eat into this rubber. You actually don't need any grease on the back of pads if they have anti-squeal shims on them. You can still put normal brake grease on here if you'd like, but I won't be. If they have rubber shims on the back, I never put any grease on the back. And the last thing will be the caliper bolts. So like I said, these are not the same as the slide pins that go into the bores on the caliper brackets with rubber boots on. These pin types are just going into a rubber sleeve on the caliper, so we really only need a very thin layer on here. Extra will just get wiped off by that sleeve, but I do like to put something on. So just a smidge of the pin grease, and I'll just do a layer on each one. But literally that's just a thin layer that I've put on there. Stand them up on their end, and the same for the other one. Okay, now we're ready to start fitting everything back onto the car. First, we'll fit the new disc to the car and line up the holes with the holes on the hub. So you've got your brake disc screws and obviously your 5 wheel bolt holes as well. It'll only go on one way because of the offset of the bolt pattern. And then just get one of your T40 disc screws started. Take that one in, keep the face pressed against the hub. Take that one in and just slack it off a little. And then again, press against the hub. Make sure you're all the way against that face. If you're not, they shouldn't really go in properly because they're countersunk. They will help guide you on, and just off a little bit, give it a good wiggle, push, seat it, tight down by hand, and then just grab yourself a ratchet. We'll just pinch these up as much as we can for now until we can torque them when the bracket is fitted on. And with the disc fitted on, I'll just give it that final clean just on the braking surfaces on both sides, spray onto a bit of shop towel and just do the braking surfaces on both sides. If we do manage to dirty it up again, say when we're refitting the caliper bracket or anything like that, we will obviously just simply need to clean the disc again and do the back as well. Just when you're rotating the disc, just simply have your hand on the edge. Refit the caliper bracket now. We've got the two 18mm that we already cleaned up at the bench, and they need some thread lock on. I'm going to be using Loctite 243 for this, and all you need is just a glob on each one. On the threads there. Just a good dollop. And we'll just get these started by hand and then run them down. And the other one. Give them a nip up and then we'll torque them down. And the torque for these is 105 Nm. Just needed to move the other camera tripod out the way. Sometimes getting in and being able to do stuff, sometimes it's just a bit too, that was 104, just a bit too tighter access to have two cameras going on. There we go, that's better. 106, and the bottom one as well. .106 again. Right, with the caliper bracket tight, now we can lock the disc and torque down the disc retaining screws. Stick a screwdriver into the vents on the disc again. And the torque for these disc retaining screws is 15 Nm. .7, 16.3. Close enough, that'd be fine. Right, we can refit our pads now. We'll start with the one that goes into the caliper. just take it off the hook and rest it on top of the brake disc like that for a second. So you want the one with the big metal clip on the back that goes into the piston, and either wear clean gloves or else don't touch the friction material. And then we're just going to offer this in to the piston and push on it so that it goes into the caliper piston. It's a little bit fiddly. And the other one, the outboard one, just simply slides into and sits on your bracket there. Right, now we can refit the caliper. Just get your Allen, 7mm Allen bit socket, and grab your pins. Do it this way so that you don't wipe the grease off of them. And if you just bring them in to the sleeves that they go into, much easier to do it this way, and just get them started. Don't take them all the way in, otherwise they'll get in your way when you're trying to put the caliper back on. But this just makes getting them in a whole lot easier. It's quite difficult to see. And just keep them back a bit. You don't actually want them poking through this side, or you struggle to get the caliper on. But that way they're in place ready. And now we just offer our caliper into position and watch you don't knock out the outboard pad there. And then if you just look around the back, and what you can do, bolt holes are not particularly easy to line up, but it's best to look down over the top to get this first one started. And once you're able to get that one lined up in the hole, you should be home free. What I like to do, I'll fit the ratchet. So I've got it started in the hole and I'm just backtracking it, and we'll just wait to feel that click, and we know we've got that correctly engaged. Run that one part the way in and then switch to the bottom one. Now it's the bottom one that's going to be a bit of a nuisance. To get it located. There we go. And run these two in, just with a 3/8, just until they bottom down. And I could not find any reference to these being Loctited or anything like that. Usually caliper pin bolts are Loctited, but in this case, no. And I could not find Renault manual or anything like that, any reference to them needing it. And the torque for these is 27 Nm. And the bottom one as well. And lastly, just get these around the back of here, get your little bolt covers, pop back in again, and the bottom one as well. Make sure they go all the way in. Now we need to get the anti-rattle clip back in. Same as with what I said earlier, don't force it too much or you might deform it out of shape. So the best thing to do is get one end in the hole, keeping that ear behind the caliper bracket bit there. Then get the other one started. And then, if you can, at the same time, just manipulate, try and keep this pressed in, and manipulate that past there. And then, if you get a punch or a screwdriver, you can just start to tap in the pins there, round. Just watch that neither of these parts try to spring out on you, which they may do. Reseat them. And then basically this part here is going to be touching the caliper itself, and these are going to be pressing onto the caliper bracket, and you just want to find a sort of happy medium for everything involved. Make sure it's all nicely on, so you can push these two back by hand. Make sure they're nicely on there and on there and seated into here. And then don't forget, easy enough to do, don't forget to refit the brake hose back into the bracket on the suspension strut. So it's back held in place there. Right, grab everything out from under the car. And then we can go ahead and refit the wheel. Get these 5 17mm bolts just started by hand and then pinched up with a ratchet. We'll torque both sets of wheel bolts when the car is back on the ground. Right, now we need to do the other side as well. It's the exact same procedure again, so I'll speed through that now, and if I encounter any issues, I'll stop and show you that. Okay, so first problem we come across on this side, didn't happen on the other side like you saw, but the disc is seized to the hub on this side. So we'll get a hammer. This isn't a particularly big one, but I got it handy right now. And just start, we're gonna hit on the top hat on the disc. There we go, easy peasy. Okay, we do have another issue on this side. The piston is not going back into the caliper very easily at all. I did get it started by using one of the screw-in ones rather than this hand pressure one, piston pushback tool, but they really should just push in with hand pressure alone, should be more than enough. That is the danger with the ones that you wind in, is that you might not necessarily feel sticking caliper. They really should go in very easily. Now, if this one is sticking, that really means it's only a matter of time. I have got it going in now, but it really does mean that it's just a matter of time until it seizes. The hose or the caliper could be causing this. Usually I would just investigate now rather than push it in all the way anyway, but I do need the car out the garage today, so I'll just take it on a quick test drive and see how it is. If it's sticking again, then we'll have to deal with that in another video. So, quick little trip into the future here. After a quick test drive, only about a mile, the brakes on this side are dragging again already. It's not terrible, but they're definitely hotter than the other side, and obviously I've no interest in trashing brand new brakes. So I'll be making a video into investigating and then replacing the offending component, whether that be the hose or the caliper. So if you've got problems pushing your piston back, be sure to check that out. I'll put a card up on the screen now and a link in the description. If we look here, these brakes on this side are definitely dragging. If you apply the pedal, it goes solid, but if you release, it's just difficult to rotate by hand. Start comparison to the other side, which is fine, where the wheel just rotates freely, no bother. Right, that's this side all done as well. No other hiccups with this one. So we'll just refit the wheel to this side and then we can lower the car to the ground. Right, with the other side all done and wheel back on, we can lower the car down now. Just make sure you've cleared everything out from underneath. So one side down, go do the other. Okay. Right, torque our wheel bolts up now. 110 Nm on these. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Go to the other side. Right, now we need to head to the driver's seat for a very important part of the job. We're going to be pumping our brake pedal to bring the pads back into contact with the discs. Pump it until it's nice and firm. Do not forget to do this or you won't have any brakes until you've pumped the pedal up. So pump the pedal until you have a nice firm brake pedal. Right, the last thing to do with the car back down and level now is just check the brake fluid level. Make sure it's between the minimum and maximum markings. Best way to do that, I find, is get a torch, come in at the side and just make sure that the level is good, which it is, and then refit your fluid reservoir cap as well. Right, we'll drop the bonnet down and that's this job done. Right guys, that's this job finished. Front brakes are much easier than rear brakes on these Scenics. Now don't forget to take your car out for a quick test drive and bed the pads in according to the brake pad manufacturer's instructions. Now as always guys, if you've enjoyed this video or it's helped you out at all, then please hit that like button for me. If you'd like to see more videos from the channel in the future, then don't forget to subscribe. You can find me over on Instagram at SocketsAndSideburns. Thanks for watching guys, I'll see you in the next video.